Logan Edge here, Florida Gun Rights, with Dustin Curtis, the political director of the National Association for Gun Rights. We're here delivering 140,000 petitions today to the Criminal Justice Subcommittee. Every single Republican will be getting these petitions. We're delivering these petitions because since January, House Bill 6029, the bill to repeal red flag gun confiscation, has been sitting in this committee with no action. So we're bringing these petitions showing them that gun owners are demanding them to move forward with this bill. There is no excuse, and this is unacceptable, to let such a great bill for our gun rights die in committee with no action. These petitions also are demanding that they keep their hands off open carry. As you know, the state appellate court struck down the open carry ban in September, and these rhinos are trying anything that they can to restrict that right. So we're delivering these petitions today. If you did not get a chance to sign our petition, there'll be a link below in this video. Please click the link. It will send a message directly to your representative telling them to repeal red flag gun confiscation and keep their hands off open carry. Thank you guys so much and have a great day.
So on today's episode of Making Waves, the Florida Report, we are actually going to be talking gun rights here appropriately in the Gunshine State. But you know what? For the Gunshine State, we actually have a lot more in common with Illinois' gun laws than we do Alabama's gun laws. And we're going to be talking about that in this episode. I'd like to introduce my two guests for this episode. First, I want to introduce Luis Valdes, who comes to us as the Southeast Director of the Gun Owners of America. And I'd also like to introduce Logan Edge, the Executive Director of Florida Gun Rights. Gentlemen, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, Luis, I want to start with you. What do you think about what I just said? I mean, we are the Gunshine State, but we certainly don't act like the Gunshine State, do we, when it comes to gun laws?
As you know, Florida has a long history with gun control. We are one of the outliers in the deep red South. We're one of the outliers as a Republican state in reality. We have the last half decade or so has been a long, hard fight to right the wrongs that have existed, but there's still many more wrongs to be righted. You know, we still have a bump stock ban in place. We still have red flag laws in place. We still have an under 21 purchase and carry ban in place. Now, the beautiful thing is with our lawsuit that we just won in court regarding open carry, at least now adults under the age of 21 could legally open carry, but still they should be able to conceal carry too, because last I checked, the Second Amendment says shall not be infringed. There is no parentheses or anything that says in it that says, hey, by the way, you can't do this or but or maybe. It's just shall not be infringed. So we have a lot to fix, but from our experience, and when you were in the legislature, Doctor, it was you fought tooth and nail for gun rights, and we were there beside you fighting for those rights.
Well, and Logan, any comment on the fact that the Gunshine State has some very, very strict laws, more typical of places like California, New York? I mean, we have very little in common with our sister states here of Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to say it. I'm a college football guy, so the way Florida we have our gun laws. I don't even know if we belong in the SEC. We're behind Georgia, we're behind South Carolina, we're behind Alabama, we're behind Louisiana. I mean, is this why Florida and Florida State have both been terrible the past few years? I don't know. But the way Luis said it, I think that's very important to hound on. It took a lawsuit to get open carry repealed that had been a ban since the late 80s. Florida was the only Republican state for a very long time that had an outright ban on open carry, like Illinois, like DC, some of these blue states and tyrannical places that no conservative wants to live under those laws. And especially with Florida, so many people have moved here for that free state of Florida mentality, but unfortunately our gun laws are really lacking behind. And we're fighting hard. But Lewis kind of already mentioned all the bills. I mean, we have a lot of work to do.
Well, in Logan, up here in the Panhandle, we refer to the state as the somewhat free state of Florida because, like you said, there's a lot of work that needs to be done as far as Second Amendment protections. So, Lewis, since you brought up the subject, how does it make you feel to know that the only reason Florida's gun laws aren't any worse than they currently are was because of a lawsuit that you won? The fact that it wasn't a Florida legislative body that corrected the problem, it literally took a lawsuit to fix one of the many problems. That can instill a lot of confidence in you, can it?
It's very insulting when you have elected officials campaign that they're pro-gun, that they're 2A defenders, and yet when we bring up a simple matter of repealing Janet Reno's open carry ban, and they refuse to do it, and one of the excuses that they use was, well, it's international tourists. Well, look, Visit Florida, the state's official tourism industry tracks tourists, and the numbers are 96% are American, only 4% are foreigners. So you had Republican lawmakers tell me in my face that they were refusing to repeal a Democrat gun control going all the way back to 1987 because 4% of tourists, they didn't want to offend them. When here's the shocking thing, 45 states have open carry, which means the vast majority of tourists that visit Florida had open carry. It's not an issue in their home states. Why would it be an issue here? But they refused to do it. And the fact that we had to fight them in court to repeal this unjust, unconstitutional stain on Florida's record shows you where lawmakers sometimes stand on our civil rights. And it's sad, it is insulting, and it is revolting that we had to go that far. I would much rather work with the legislature and propose good legislation, like what we did with you, give you guys good drafts and say, hey, here's what needs to be fixed. Let's get this across the finish line. Let's get it on the governor's desk. But that's not what the legislature wanted to do. So we took them to court. And GOA's stance is very simple. We don't compromise, and we will fight the fight, whether it's in the halls of the Capitol or it's in the halls of the courts.
And we had a governor who had been saying for years that, hey, put open carry on my desk, I'll sign it. But we couldn't even get an open carry bill to the governor's desk, which is pretty shameful. Logan, I'm going to ask you about my bill from a couple years back. We refer to it up here in the Panhandle as the shot clock bill. Across the state of Florida, we had people that were getting a legally purchased firearm, and when they would go to do their background check, FDLE was kind of slow rolling them. A lot of people, their applications were pending. They were taking, in some cases, upwards of several months, if not a year or two. So Logan, even in that situation, my bill passed the Florida House, got absolutely shut down in the Florida Senate. And again, rather than meaningful change, because, Logan, technically, there is no pending option in the Florida statutes. Those decisions are supposed to be made within 72 hours. All we were trying to get the legislature to do was to follow the law and to make FDLE follow the law. Instead, when I was a legislator, what I was being told in the halls of the legislature was, oh, hey, let's take it easy on FDLE. Come on, they're doing the best they can. I mean, we promise we'll speed them up if you won't put pressure on us. And it's like, guys, you're abusing a statute that doesn't even exist. You don't have the power to do what you're doing. How does that make you feel to know these conversations are literally happening in the halls of Tallahassee?
Yeah, it's absolutely insane when you talk to legislators and you hear the rumblings going on in Tallahassee where I don't know who taught them this or it's just an old swamp trick, but guys, if we don't do anything, something magically will happen, is the way that the Tallahassee legislature mysteriously works. If you don't speak up or if you don't force a vote or if you don't show up to, these hearings and make us fuss, well, that might bother some legislators. But guys, if you do that, none of this will happen. I mean, they're living in a delusional world that, unfortunately, if something bad is happening, it's not personal to call out a problem within a government agency or a legislator if they're holding something up. It's just, it's strictly business. It's what you have to do to try to right wrong. Sometimes it could be just incompetence or somebody made a mistake, or other times, it could be nefarious and people are doing the bidding of other special interests and they're not actually holding true to their constituents that, they promise to be a strong defender of gun rights.
We have a Bill of Rights, and the Bill of Rights, when I look at the Bill of Rights, I see a lot of language that hopefully I will never need, right? The Bill of Rights was never intended to be a popular thing. When I see the clauses about unlawful search and seizure, when I see the stuff about needing a speedy trial, I'm hoping this stuff never applies to me. You have the right to not give testimony against yourself. Hopefully these things will never come into play in my life. But again, First and Second Amendment are exactly the same. They weren't put there to protect popular stances, right? Because if you're the king or if you're the tyrant, of course no one's going to criticize your speech. You're the king. They were put there to protect stances that might come under fire, stances that might come under attack. Do you read the Bill of Rights the same way I do? That there's a reason that Amendment 2 is the only amendment that has the words shall not be infringed. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the entire Bill of Rights are designed to be inconvenient to the state. It is not there for us. It is there to safeguard the government from intruding on us. And I think a lot of times, especially with search and seizure, the open carry discussion, a lot of it was, hey, this could be dangerous. This is going to make people uncomfortable. But unfortunately, I don't really care if it makes you uncomfortable or if it makes the police go get a warrant. That is in our Constitution. That is our God given right. And that is the natural rights of man that our founders bestowed upon us as our birthright. So the Second Amendment is absolute. It was written by men that had just fought off a tyrannical government when they used their arms to do it. So, the private ownership, the private manufacture of weapons is as old as the Constitution itself. Before it predates the Constitution, really. So, yeah, absolutely. The Bill of Rights is the most foundational aspect of our civilization as Americans.
Yeah, to reiterate on that, the founding fathers, they completely understood that our rights even predated the drafting of the Constitution. Because remember, before that, we had the Articles of Confederation. Before that, we had the Magna Carta. The founding fathers drafted the Bill of Rights to enumerate rights specifically to remind the government, hey, these are so important. We're putting them down on parchment so you idiots don't screw this up. And that's the honest truth. The right to self-defense against tyrannical forces, whether it's on the streets or it's in the halls of government, are inalienable. They are God-given. And to give you the prime example, there is no authority on the plains of Africa that the zebra asks for to kick the lion in the face when it is trying to be eaten. The zebra protects itself from the lion, no ifs, ands, or buts. We have that same right to protect ourselves from tyranny, whether it's a street criminal trying to mug us or break into our homes, or it's government trying to violate our rights. No ifs, ands, or buts. Period. My family fled communism in 1961. The first thing Fidel Castro did when he took power was he confiscated the arms of the people. He stood before the people and he said, "Armas por qué? Guns, why? I will protect you. The state will protect you." And how has that turned out? There's a reason why my brethren fled Cuba over shark-infested waters on rafts made by garbage to come to liberty that is the United States, because gun control and tyranny go hand in hand.
Oh, and it's funny that you kind of couch it in those terms, because as you're talking about, hey, these people are idiots, we have to literally spell it out in the Bill of Rights. I'm thinking of two different bills I ran during my tenure in the Florida House. One of them was my hallmark medical conscience bill, where I basically said, hey, you can't take away a doctor's license for disagreeing with things like the COVID vaccines and stuff like that. And then, of course, I had another bill that was, the press called it the Right to Rock bill, where I said, you can't keep Ted Nugent from playing his concert because you disagree with his politics or what he says on stage. And both times, Lewis, the criticism of both bills, even my medical conscience bill, the critics said, well, that's just the First Amendment. You're just restating the First Amendment. And my answer was, yeah, no shit. Sometimes you have to keep saying it over and over and over. Again, common sense is not very common nowadays, but yeah, sometimes it's important to underline the First Amendment. And in our case, we want to underline the Second Amendment because unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that just don't seem to get the Second Amendment. And Lewis, listen, I'm going to throw it back to you because my next question is, explain to the viewers, we've got viewership across America. Explain to them, when we say Florida's gun rights are more like Illinois, explain to them what we're talking about. We're talking about red flag laws. Explain to them the waiting period. Explain to them all the things that we do in Florida that they may not even do in their home states, because they're probably wanting to know, how did we get here and what exactly are the gun laws in Florida?
So Florida's gun laws are a convoluted mess compared to a number of states. One, we have mandatory waiting periods that you have to wait a mandatory 3 days, but the counties are allowed to amend it up to 5. So places like Miami-Dade and Broward County have up to 5-day waiting periods. Oh, and by the way, weekends and holidays don't count. So if you purchased your gun, this past Friday, guess what? Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, they don't count for the waiting period. Now, if you have a concealed carry permit, you get to skip that. But one of the screwed up things is the legislature, instead of repealing the waiting period as a whole, they just keep doing carve outs. So they just did a carve out that if you're in law enforcement, and I say this as a former cop, I'm not trying to bash my brothers and sisters that wear the badge, but here's the honest fact. They passed a bill and signed it into law that if you're a cop, you don't need a concealed carry permit to skip the waiting period. Now, last I checked, the whole thing of the revolution against the British Crown was to end the idea of different classes of nobility. And me carrying a piece of tin in my wallet as a career choice didn't make me any better than you or Logan or any other Floridian. We are all Americans and we all have the same rights. We shouldn't have waiting periods to begin with. But on top of that, we have a bump stock ban that is so egregiously written. It bans force reset triggers. It bans binary triggers. It even makes it a possible felony for me to simply lighten the trigger pull of my Glock from 5.5 pounds to 3 pounds with the change of a simple connector plate. Mm-hmm. We have an under 21 purchase ban. We have numerous gun-free zones. We have red flag laws, which are an absolute violation of due process. It flips our criminal justice system from innocent until proven guilty, where the state must prove you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, to where you must prove you're innocent to be able to simply get back your lawfully owned property and exercise your rights. It tramples the Fourth and Fifth Amendment to go after your Second Amendment. And that is wrong for so many reasons, because it is abused. It is used to completely disarm victims of domestic violence. Just think of this. If you're a woman in a relationship where you're abused and you want to divorce this guy who's beaten you, the first thing that guy's attorney is going to do is file a claim against you. Oh, well, she makes threats against my client, the husband, so we're going to file for a red flag petition. We're going to have her stripped of her firearms. Now she has to defend herself in court to be able to defend herself on the streets from the guy who wants to beat her. This doesn't make any sense. And as we've seen time and time again in places like New York, California, Illinois, Washington, D.C., gun control doesn't work. Criminals don't care. Murder's been illegal since Hammurabi carved it into a stone tablet thousands of years ago. Guess what? Criminals are criminals because they break the law. This isn't shocking. All these laws do is hurt the law-abiding.
Well, and Lewis, when you talk about the absolute hypocrisy in some of the statutes, I can think of two just right offhand, right? So when you ask people who are smarter than me about these red flag laws, I'm like, they need to be out of there. There's no reason for a red flag law. The excuse they give us, they say, well, it's because the Baker Act is broken, right? Because there might be some crazy guy who does something. So they will have the problem right in front of their face. They will say the problem is our Baker Act is no good. And I guess it's too much work to fix the Baker Act or to put psychotics away in Chattahoochee. I guess that doesn't look good or something. Instead, they'd rather punish the law-abiding citizens who are going to do exactly what the laws. Again, to me, it makes no sense. And Logan, here's another example, right? Raising the purchase age of long guns from 18 to 21. Do you like how I said that, Logan? It raises the purchase age. It's not illegal to have the gun in your possession. It's only illegal to be the one to purchase it now under Florida law, which makes no sense, right? So unless you have a receipt somewhere, there could be an 18-year-old walking around right now with a gun in his hand, and a cop can't do anything about it based on Florida law. So again, just the absolute hypocrisy, the nonsensical nature of some of these laws, right? They're so worried about an 18-year-old having a gun that they only prevent him from purchasing the gun. I mean, it's crazy. What have you seen similar instances, Logan, of just things in the statute where you're like, who wrote this?
Yeah, the bump stock one that Lewis was talking about with how poorly written it is truly insane. I mean, it's and in situations like that, it's always written by people that don't understand firearms is really what it comes down to. And they're trying to regulate things that they don't understand, that they saw, that they think is scary or dangerous when it isn't. And they think that this is a common sense. I love the common sense language that they always use. And it's never common sense because, it's not written by gunnies. It's not written by people that are in the community, that understand it, that have been around it their whole lives. So, it's really like talking to a wall, and it's unfortunate that those are the people that are writing our laws.
So how we got here was basically the Parkland shooting in 2018. All these horrible statutes that we've been referring to, most of them are from the 2018 bill. And, guys, I've always said, even when I was in the legislature, I wasn't there in 2018. So, I don't know the pressure those members were under. It's one thing to be wrong, right? But it takes a bigger man or a bigger woman to admit when they're wrong. So my problem is with those people who passed the 2018 law. They know they made a mistake, but they're still doubling down on it. Lewis mentioned earlier, he helped me tremendously with my shot clock bill to get that waiting period fixed. We had passed the House, but things were not looking good in the Senate, right? Y'all know who was holding it down in the Senate. Y'all remember who the Senate president was then, and we may mention her a little later. I didn't really have much ammunition, pardon the pun, to bring to bear on the subject because I don't have any pull in the Senate. But I knew somebody that did have pull in the Senate. 2024 was an election year. I got a phone call from Senator Rick Scott. So Senator Scott calls me and asks for my endorsement. And that was the only leverage I had. I said, well, Senator, listen, you could help me too. We've got a real common sense bill that's passed the House, but your friend Kathleen over in the Florida Senate won't even give it a hearing in the Senate. Will you please reach out to your friend Kathleen and let her know this is a common sense bill? This isn't a crazy bill. This is a realistic bill. We're not asking for much. We're just asking for a shot clock on these waiting periods. Because I don't think Rick Scott's man enough to admit he made a mistake. I don't think some of these people are man enough to scale it back. We're going to have to do it ourselves. So here in the current legislative session, gentlemen, what are we looking at? Lewis, I'll let you go first and tell us the bills that are currently in process to repeal some of these onerous restrictions. Tell us about them and tell us where they're stalled.
Well, right now there's the under 21 purchase ban repeal bill. It's passed the House. It's being stalled in the Senate with in the Rules Committee under Senator Kathleen Pasademo, the former Senate president. Along with that, we currently have the bump stock ban repeal and the red flag repeal bill, and they're both currently in the Criminal Justice Subcommittee in the House. and they haven't been brought up for a single vote or debate at all. And that's troubling. And it's especially troubling with the under 21, because the argument the state has made is that someone under the age of 21 doesn't have the mental faculties to own a firearm. But you could be a cop at 19 in Florida, be an armed agent of the state, and use up to lethal force to enforce the very law that the state is arguing someone under the age of 21 doesn't have the mental faculty to possess a firearm for. But they're saying if you're an armed agent of the state, we'll let you skip the waiting period, we'll let you buy a gun. Oh, and by the way, you could use lethal force to enforce this law for us. That is extremely hypocritical, and these laws need to be repealed, and our Republican supermajority is a supermajority in name only. I mean, we got lawmakers there like Representative Hillary Cassell, who is an extreme anti-gun Democrat who only swapped jerseys to Team R because of other issues, but she's still chanting the rah-rah gun control thing, and the RPOF hasn't censured her in any way, shape, or form.
Well, and don't get me started, Lewis, on that whole 25-year-old, this new theory about the prefrontal cortex. That's the cry of the truly desperate. You get the Democrats like my friend Robin Bartleman, who brings up the prefrontal cortex. Oh, you can't possibly make a rational decision until you're 25. But yet those same Democrats, if you remember, Lewis, they want to drop the voting age down to about 16 or so.
Yep.
They want adolescents to vote for president, but they don't want them to exercise their rights. So, Logan, I wanted to switch to you for a second because, Lewis laid out the bills that we're talking about. Let the viewers know, Lewis and Logan, I'm going to come to you, Logan. Let them know that these aren't bills to make Florida unique or make Florida the leader of gun rights. These are repealer bills just simply to bring us to an even keel with states like Mississippi and Tennessee and Alabama. Am I right?
Yes. A lot of this is to get us on par with pretty much every other red state in the country. I think the only other red state that has red flags is Indiana. And I believe that was actually passed before it became a supermajority Republican state. I could be wrong on that, but I think my timeline is correct. But yeah, I mean, these are simple bills that are being held up by people that claim to be great patriots and great supporters of the Second Amendment. And what I've been getting pushback for recently is, well, if these bills are in committee, don't put pressure, don't attack anybody because we already passed one gun bill and the Senate won't hear it. So if the Senate won't hear the under 21 purchase ban repeal, then we shouldn't do anything else on guns, which, they're a co-equal branch. They have their own agenda. That is the whole point of a legislature. You have the lower chamber and the upper chamber, and you pass different bills and you try to come together and work through the legislative process. So my organization, I don't know, you said this will be dropped next week. So this week we're actually delivering 140,000 petitions to every Republican on the Criminal Justice Committee for holding up these bills. Because it's just, we're coming here toward the end of session, and we know, I know Lewis knows, I know if this bill isn't heard in the next couple days, in the next week, what the excuse will now be is, well, we can't do it because we got to work on the budget. And there goes two great gun bills that I know my members very much care about, and I know Lewis's at GOAs, I'm sure, are very concerned about these bills. So they're trying to sit on it, run out the clock, and then once they get to that last week or two of session, it will be, well, sorry, guys, we'll have to try again next year. And I just think that's unacceptable.
Well, and Logan, you mentioned something earlier. You were talking about the co-equal branches of government. Y'all aren't new to politics. Y'all been following all the drama. You've been popping the popcorn when you see Danny Perez basically engineering a mutiny against America's governor, Ron DeSantis. And when you ask the rogue Florida House, hey, why are Republicans fighting true heroic Republicans like Ron DeSantis? What the hell is going on? The answer you would get would be, well, we're a co-equal branch of government. We're exerting the independent, we're reestablishing the independent nature of the Florida House. Well, Lewis, what better way to establish your independence than to pass all this gun legislation and put it in the Senate slot?
Exactly. You know, the fact that all of these lawmakers constantly run for reelection, they have this, and they proclaim that they're pro-gun, but their strategy is very simple. If these bills are never brought up for a vote, that means that their record is technically clean because a vote was never taken. So they get to keep proclaiming they're pro-gun, while behind the scenes they're killing pro-gun bills, they're blocking its passage, and they're violating our Second Amendment rights. But in front of the everyday voter that doesn't deep dive into this and know how the game is played in Tallahassee, they don't understand that in reality, by not taking action, these lawmakers are very much stalling and running out the clock, specifically so they have a clean record, but they don't have to make the hard decision of voting yes or no against a pro-gun bill. And that's the biggest issue that we see here. And a lot of it is the dog and pony show. You know, they will pass a bill knowing that either the Senate will block it or the House will block it, because the constant excuse they always give is, oh, well, it needs a companion bill in the other chamber. Really? The Parkland bill didn't have a companion bill, and they rushed that within 16 to 17 days from being introduced to getting to Rick Scott's desk and signed into law. But they spend half a session arguing what's going to be the state's dessert or the state's bird. But something as simple as the Second Amendment, they can't even bring it up for a vote. Let's be honest here. They're playing us for suckers. They're giving us crumbs, and they think we're going to sit there and take it when we're not. And this is not the old way anymore. GOA's stance is very simple. We don't compromise, and that's why we're not asking for a seat at the table. We're flipping the table over, and we're taking them to court. That's why we filed lawsuits, and that's why we continue to do this, because in the end, we're in it to win it, and winning is the Second Amendment, no more, no less.
Well, and Lewis, I just want to say for the record, one of my proudest, probably my most proud moment in the Florida legislature was when the Gun Owners of America, the Florida branch, named me the Florida Legislator of the Year for standing up for the Second Amendment. And you mentioned the dog and pony show that you get a lot in the legislature. I'm pretty sure you guys knew, but if you didn't know, I just want to just state for the record, when I ran that shot clock bill, that was in no way a dog and pony show. Like I said, not only did it pass the House, but in my closing argument on the floor of the Florida House, I literally begged Senator Kathleen Passidomo to hear my bill. I mean, if people wanted to know where the blockage was, I pointed directly to it and begged her for mercy. Please hear my bill. And not only that, the phone call I mentioned earlier with Senator Rick Scott to try and put some leverage on his friends from Naples, that phone call literally happened. I mean, I pulled out every stop I could to get that passed. You're never going to see a more common sense bill than that shot clock bill. Are you hopeful that any of these bills are going to see the light of day, or what are your thoughts?
We have fought this battle over and over again, and we will not give up. We will fight until this session comes to an end. And it's very simple. We will put pressure on lawmakers, and we will continue to put pressure on lawmakers because they serve us. We don't serve them. We're their boss. We should be on top of them saying, where are you with your work product? So we're going to push this issue until the clock runs out. And if the clock runs out, then we're going to hold it over their heads come election time. No more, no less.
Well, gentlemen, listen, I want to get your opinion on a few of the legislators in Tallahassee. Those are my old colleagues. Once you're out of the game, so to speak, the texts don't come as frequently as they used to anymore. Now, I guess when you're a useful idiot, your phone lights up, and when you're no longer useful, the phone doesn't light up anymore. But, a lot of those legislators, I know them personally. Some of them, I believe, do the best they can on the segment. Some of them are just awful. They're just terrible. And so I want to spend the rest of our time. I want to recognize 3 legislators, and we each get 1 vote each. Let's recognize three legislators that we think are the absolute worst when it comes to the Second Amendment. Maybe people who have let us down, maybe people who have promised one thing and done another. Maybe it's the people who are responsible for these bills not getting the traction they should get. And then in closing, this may be the harder award. We're each going to have to think of a legislator who we think is the best Second Amendment legislator, the person who's always down in the trenches, the person who we think we can count on or we hope we can count on. That award will probably be harder to give out because I'm going to have to think long and hard about who a best legislator would be. And let's start with the worst legislators. But guys, listen, this isn't going to be easy, okay? This isn't going to be like shooting fish in a barrel. We're not going to name any Democrats, okay? Or at least not any current Democrats, because that's too easy, right? I'm talking about people who say they're Republican. They say they respect the Bill of Rights. They claim to have read the Constitution. We're talking about three legislators who basically say they're Republican, but they don't vote Republican. Lewis, I'm going to let you go first. Who's a Republican legislator that you would like to recognize as the worst Second Amendment legislator?
I already mentioned her name once, Representative Hillary Cassell. Uh, she was a former Democrat, and she literally swapped her jersey from Team D to Team R this past election cycle simply because of some other political issues. But she was welcomed into the Republican Party of Florida with open arms. They said she was the best thing since sliced bread. I brought up her history, her anti-gun, her anti-Second Amendment history to the party. I brought it up with other lawmakers, and they basically all told me to go sit down in a corner and be quiet. And guess what? Her voting record now as a Republican flat out shows where she stands on the Second Amendment. She's one of the few Republicans in the last two cycles to vote against repealing the under 21 purchase ban. I mean, it's just ludicrous. It's ludicrous. This is what the party is welcoming in with open arms. This says she is an example of the institutional rot that exists not just within lawmakers, but within the Republican political apparatus that exists within the state, because they will let someone like her in and they will not censure her. They will not punish her for literally going against the party platform. That is a major issue. So that's my nomination.
Logan, before we get to your nomination, any comment on Lewis's choice?
Oh, I mean, watching the Republicans cheer on making the Republican caucus more liberal has just been disgusting. It's been just loser mentality from the Republicans. I mean, it's great to have a big tent, and it's always good to grow your numbers, but um, we don't need to water down our message. We don't need to water down conservatism, and we don't need to water down where we stand on some of the most important issues as conservatives and Republicans. So, bringing in a liberal really doesn't help us in this situation. It really hurts us.
Again, it's already been said. I don't know why we needed an extra Republican at this juncture. So this is someone who's a Republican way back when Republicanism began to get popular, ditched the Republican Party for the Democrats, and now that Trump had a landslide victory, now all of a sudden wants to reclaim the mantle. Yeah, I don't think that was helpful. I don't think we needed a Republican to vote no on Second Amendment bills. We already have a supermajority. What did the Republican Party gain from accepting this person in the guise of being a fake Republican? I don't get it at all. So Logan, I want to hear your nominee. Well, I guess it's your award recipient actually for worst 2A legislator of the year, or maybe biggest disappointment, whatever you want to call it.
Um, I think the big disappointment would be Representative Monique Miller. She campaigned really hard on being a strong Second Amendment advocate. And, after you left the House last year, Doc, me and Lewis were scrambling, trying to get open carry. And, she told us she was going to be our gal in the House, and she was going to do it. And she succumbed to pressure and squatted on the bill and ended up holding it up and effectively killing open carry last year, um, before the court case and everything had legalized it. So she's a big reason why we had about a year almost where Floridians still didn't have the right to open carry, and we had to depend on a lawsuit and not legislative process.
I don't know if you guys are aware of this. So right before I left the house, because I had my congressional election coming up, and I had to resign. Right before I left, y'all knew I filed the open carry plus the red flag repeal. It was all in one bill. And I figured, okay,
Yep.
I've left it there. If someone wants to pick it up and run with it, they're welcome to it. I forget who reached out first. I want to say Monique reached out to me. I want to say Rep Miller reached out to me. I may be mistaken about that, but there were significant conversations that occurred between myself and Rep Miller. And Logan, like you, the impression I was given, maybe not so much on the red flag. I don't remember her mentioning the red flag, but the impression she gave me is that, hey, I am running open carry. We're going to get this done. Your open carry part of that bill is in good hands. So every time she would call for advice or text me, I would hang up thinking, okay, maybe this is the year we get something done. And of course, y'all know, as I said earlier, we've got a governor who's been begging for it. He said, just put it on my desk, I'll sign it. So, as a freshman, when you have a governor that's saying this is a priority, send it to me. Why would you kill your own bill? I think her quote, Lewis, at the time was this: the timing is all wrong, or something. Do you remember her, Lewis, saying that? Like something, the timing's off for open carry. What was her cop out on that?
I don't remember what her comment specifically was, but I remember the governor basically said, it's never the wrong time to do the right thing as a response to that. And, we don't go after lawmakers just to go after lawmakers. Our stance is very simple. We go after the issues. So that year, we asked her to file the open carry bill, and she said she was going to do it, and she didn't. Well, at the same time, she filed the bill that ultimately repealed the ban on the sale of firearms and ammunition during declared states of emergency. So, on our case, we're going after her on one issue, and at the same time, we're commending her on another, and that just shows where we stand. We are an issues-driven organization. As you know, with our stance in the law in the legislature, I've even agreed with State Senator Pizzo sometimes. Pizzo and I agree that there should be a restoration of rights for felons. And that's what it comes down to. This isn't about Team R or Team D. This is about civil rights, and lawmakers need to defend those rights, no more, no less. And especially when the governor's saying, hey, I want it on my desk, everyone should be tripping over themselves trying to outdo each other on that bill, not just sit there and go, well, so-and-so said I shouldn't file it, so I'm not. No, they should go be like, hey, here's mine. Oh, yeah? Well, I'm going to one-up you. Here's mine.
Well, and Logan, how about this? How about we make a deal? I'm convinced that there must have been something going on behind the scenes. Because like I said, Rep Miller was she was acting like she was my 2A champion. She was acting like she's going to follow in my footsteps. Then next thing I know, I'm reading in the papers that, she says now is not the time. If something did go on behind the scenes, right? And y'all know about a month later, Danny Perez basically declared war on DeSantis. Maybe
Mhm.
something happened. Maybe there was a conversation. Maybe Perez didn't want to give DeSantis a victory on the Second Amendment. I mean, who knows, right? How about, Logan, we make this deal? How about if Monique Miller comes on this podcast or basically goes in front of any microphone and spills the tea on what happened to change her mind on open carry? Who got in her ear? What did they threaten her with? What were the promises made? How about if she gives us the straight scoop on what happened? We'll take that award back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't. It's nothing personal. I would love to have her being, on our side. And I'm sure that there was pressure. I'm sure as a freshman, I've heard some stories. I think you might have been the one that broke the shakedown that happened to all freshmen last year. So I'm sure something happened, and I hope that she can be a solid vote for us in the future on gun rights. And I would love to hear who twisted the arm and what was the tea on all of that.
Well, I tell you what, I'm going to tell you guys my choice for the worst 2A legislator of the year. And I guess I harbor old grudges. I don't know. This state senator is still there, but she was a thorn in my side for 2 years. Anything to do with the Bill of Rights, whether it was First Amendment, Second Amendment, they didn't seem to go anywhere. And it was because of Senate President Kathleen Passidomo. I mean, guys, there's a lot of legislators in Florida who they prefer to work in darkness. They don't like you to know what it is they do or how they do it or why they do it. They don't really like people to even know their names. They like to work in darkness. Well, let's just say there's a lot of Republicans up here in the Panhandle that know Kathleen Passidomo by name because we were outing her every time. When we were repealing or trying to repeal the purchase age, trying to restore the purchase age of the long guns back down to 18, blocked by Passidomo. My shot clock bill, blocked by Passidomo. So my award goes to Kathleen Passidomo, Florida's worst 2A legislator, probably not just of this year. Probably, she could probably get a lifetime award as far as I'm concerned. And before I get your guys' reactions to my pick, I love sharing stories. I love spilling the tea, like Logan said. So, so Logan, let me spill some tea on this. My shot clock bill. Okay, as benign as that was. Okay, it was not a rah radical. It wasn't a massive 2A bill by any stretch of the imagination. It was a common sense bill. My Senate sponsor that year took so much flack for filing the companion bill on that. I literally had to go from senator to senator because it was too toxic for some senators agreed to it, and then they said, I can't because I'm under orders not to file it. So again, just another anecdote I want you guys to know about why I say what I say about Kathleen Passidomo. It's one thing if you don't want to vote to repeal those terrible bills, but don't be threatening other Republicans into taking anti-Second Amendment stances. So, Lewis, now that you know the full scoop on that, what do you think of my selection?
I think it's a perfect selection. I've tussled with Kathleen Passidomo a number of years now, and her stance on the Second Amendment is disheartening. It's disgusting. It's volatile. It's revolting, especially for being in a position of leadership. And she's actually an example of why term limits are sometimes bad, because as Senate president, she's termless. She answers to no one. She does whatever she wants. She doesn't listen to her constituency. She doesn't listen to the people that put her in office. She just listens to the donor class. That all she cares about. And that's the big problem that we have here. She is a prime example of this institutional inertia that has existed within the Senate for a decade now, where leadership campaigns and promises one thing and does the exact opposite. And it's not just her. It was Wilton Simpson. It was Bill Galvano. We could just go through Senate president after Senate president after Senate president, and they're literally the same mold with a different name on themselves.
Logan, what do you think of my pick?
I'll raise you one. I think you should name the anti-Second Amendment award after her.
Hey, you're on. I think that is fair and just we'll call it the Passidomo Award. Hopefully, we don't have too many of these awards to give out in the near future. Hopefully, we get a good legislature that actually starts repealing some of these awful statutes. Let's go ahead and shift into the pro 2A legislator of the year, the good legislators that are out there. Tell you what, I'm going to start this round off because I've alluded to this state senator, the guy who did file my Senate companion. I'm talking about none other than Jonathan Martin. Senator Martin is he's a big dude, literally. He's a tall dude, but he is a strong, principled Republican that you can be proud of. He's one of the original, what we term the four horsemen. There were four people who really stood up for Governor DeSantis and stood up for freedom when the Florida House went rogue last year and tried to pass amnesty bills and all this and that. Senator Martin was one of the original four horsemen. And I just want to publicly thank Senator Martin for always standing strong on the Second Amendment. Guys, any comments on my pick?
Solid choice. In my talks with Senator Martin, he is a true 2A advocate, and he also is a great source of some inside baseball.
Yeah, I've had nothing but great interactions with the senator and his staff.
Fantastic. Well, Logan, I tell you what, who's your pick for the best 2A legislator of the year?
I would have to go with Representative Soroy. You know, I mean, since we're running all this pressure campaign for the repeal of red flag, I mean, he was the guy that filed it. He also filed the under 21 purchase ban repeal. So he's put two good gun bills. One's passed and one is kind of in limbo right now that we're working squeaky wheel on. So I'd have to say Representative Soroy.
And just so you know, Representative Soroy, he was always straight up with me. He always seemed very genuine in his support for the Second Amendment. But again, if you've got an obstructionist Senate, not a whole lot a representative can do in the Florida House, even though they can be in leadership, you know, they can have positions of authority. So I agree with you there. My hat's off to Rep Soroy. Lewis, listen, you're going to close the awards show out. I want to hear who you've got. First of all, give us your impression of Rep Soroy, and then give us your choice for Legislator of the Year.
Well, my choice was actually going to be a three-way tie, but Rep Soroy was one of my choices. So he's solid. He's good. My other choice is Representative Oberdorf. You know, he's introduced some solid, good bills this year. 6021 and 6029, the red flag repeal and the bump stock repeal. He's part of that. And my third choice is actually not in the legislature. I'm going to go with Brevard County Sheriff Wayne Ivey, because he is one of the few law enforcement officials in the state of Florida that has publicly stated he supports open carry. He supports repealing red flag laws. He supports repealing the under 21 purchase age. We have 67 county sheriffs, and he's one of the few that has put his money where his mouth is as an elected official and says, yep, I defend the entire Constitution, including the Second Amendment. So even though he's not a lawmaker, he's getting one of my picks. So it's Soroy, it's Oberdorf, and it's Sheriff Ivey.
Logan, what do you think about that choice?
It's a good one. I mean, I used to live in Brevard, so I love Sheriff Ivey. He's a great sheriff. He's great on the Second Amendment, and Representative Oberdorf as well. I met with him a couple weeks ago and really enjoyed talking with him. And you know, hopefully we can get this bump stock repeal moving as well. I mean, we've got some good gun bills, and they're just sitting there waiting on Republicans to do something. So the time's running out, and I couldn't agree more with Lewis.
So, Lewis, I agree. Those were some quality picks there. You know, Representative Overdorf was a friend of mine. I didn't know he was quite maybe as pro 2A as he turned out to be this session. So I applaud him for having the guts and the courage to file those bills and to hopefully get them through the process. I know Toby's one hell of a shortstop. I know that. So, again, it's good to have a shout out to Rep Overdorf and Wayne Ivey. Yeah, that's a good call, because there's a lot of sheriffs that, well, and not just sheriffs. I mean, I would hear from all across the state when I would preach open carry. I would hear from, you know, experts, right? Experts say, "Oh, you don't want open carry. That's stupid." I'd be like, "No, I didn't ask if it was smart or stupid. I didn't ask if you personally would open carry. I asked, how does the government have the right to keep me from deciding to open carry?" So, again, good call there on Sheriff Ivey. So, guys, we're at the end of the show. I'm going to give you each about a minute or two to say some parting words to our viewers and to let them know kind of what's at stake here in the somewhat free state of Florida. So, Logan, you have first crack. What do you want the viewers out there to know? And any websites you'd like them to go to, any kind of pressure you'd like them to exert on our legislators?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for taking the time and having us on to talk guns. Really, I would just, floridagunrights.org is our website. We have our petitions. You can join there. Also, we're on X, Florida Gun Rights on X. I'm doing, updates from the Capitol. I'll be posting all about our petition delivery and all that. We'll also have links where you can click links in our tweets where you can email and contact representatives directly on where the committee and where the bill is. Trying to exert as much pressure as possible because the politicians unfortunately won't act until they hear enough of angry gun voters or angry constituents coming down, and especially in an election year like this is the time to do it. We got to connect the legislative and the election season all in one, and make sure that they're held accountable for their actions and their votes.
Lewis, I guess you're going to take us out. Any final thoughts on the subject? Anything you want the viewers out there to know? Anybody's phones you want them to light up?
Oh, there's a lot of phones that they could light up. Basically, just a Capitol switchboard altogether. But it's real simple. Our website is gunowners.org. Joining is just $25 a year. I spend more money going through a Burger King drive-through for myself and my family, and that so every penny goes towards the fight. And one of our newest coalitions is we've relaunched Fuerza Doha. It's GOA's Hispanic Coalition because hey, you're talking about Florida. There is a large Hispanic population here, and they are gun owners, and GOA is making sure that they're getting involved in the fight because self-defense has no language. The Second Amendment has no language. We're all Americans. We all have the right to keep and bear arms. And by God, we are all going to go to Tallahassee unified and follow our nation's motto, E pluribus unum, out of many one. Together, we will make this country great. We make this state great, and we will fix the problems that are going on at Tallahassee.
I'm very privileged to be with such rational, level-headed people. I mean, people are probably thinking that we're asking for the world. We're asking for the rights that were given to us by God and rights that were enshrined in our founding document. And I think each one of you guys have done your organizations a great service uh, by having this discussion. And like I said, I'm just privileged to be here among you two guys. What if there's people out there who want to join your groups? What websites do they go to?
FloridaGunRights.org. There's a big button right in the top right hand to join, and we'll get all your information, and you'll get on my email list, and you'll hear from me all the time.
It's
Louis,
real simple. They could go to gunowners.org, and if they want to follow us on social media, it's Gun Owners on X, and I'm the real FL Gun Lobby on X. And just to finish this up here, since we have open carry now in Florida, of course, I've been open carrying.
I love it. So again, I'm just honored that you guys welcomed me into this conversation. Like I said, whether I have 3 guns or whether I have 3,000 guns, the fact of the matter is the Second Amendment is sacrosanct and shall not be infringed is very clear to me. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.